StoryMan-Jack.
Good morning, good evening, or good night, whenever or wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Just the Tip with StoryMan-Jack, and I'm StoryMan-Jack. In this episode, we're going to go over what we do when we actually get the time to rewrite a story. In this case, as in previous episodes of this particular season and series, we will rewrite The Fall of Angels. And please, if you have not subscribed, consider liking the video and share this out on all social media to your friends and family. It really helps put eyes on our work, which is the point. Even more importantly than subscribing or sharing, please leave a comment below. Not only does it help with the algorithm, your feedback, as always and will always, make me better at my craft. So, ideas, criticisms, even hateful ones, are completely welcome. Just please explain your position and why you're giving your criticism. So, last time we ended up instead of actually rewriting, really inventing a past, which that new first chapter actually itself will need to be rewritten and narrowed down even further, given more detail, further explaining things, making it quite a bit longer, and then a final rewrite where you cut out what's not relevant to the story that really narrows in your scope. But I wanted to move on to something that was has been sitting for a while that we really intended to rewrite before, which is the original first chapter, which will become chapter 2. We invented this past to focus on our main characters, but in doing that, what it did to the story was it expanded the scope of that story, which would have ended up being some sort of multi-generational saga, like, say, a series that's 38, 40 books long, or something that has to skip generations between certain aspects. And I don't really like doing that, though there is something I've been working on for a very long time that actually does that, in a way. At any rate, this is only natural for the story to do that, since it is based on a work. The inspiration for it is based on a work that was just that, and a multi-generation inspiration. But I'm not here to rewrite the traditional Bible. What I'm here to do is retell an aspect of that story, one of the little aspects of that story, in a different way, in a science fiction / fantasy sort of way that's fun and might give us ideas that were conveyed in that original work, but through a different lens, through a different perspective, and for some maybe a more relevant and believable point of view. So let's look at the original chapter 1, and then we'll pull up what I've done so far so that we can give you little examples. At the end, I'll take a paragraph and I'll show you how I actually rewrite, which is probably the most relevant thing for most folks. So this is the original. The spec story it's based on was just a little short story called Awakening, and it was just a spec story for this longer idea I had. So here is the original, and I like to do this. I mean, everybody, if you think back, has probably read a novel with examples of, at the beginning of the chapter, a little short statement of inspiration or rule or quote that sets the stage for a chapter. kind of giving some backward insight without having to F with the story, if you understand my meaning. So, that's what I did here, but I invented it. Well, because I'm using a well-known story, a biblical story, we're going to do something else. I wanted to show you what that was. So, as you can see, it's called Fall of Angels. The angels fell from heaven, their swords of fire and light, leading the way as they ensnared all the races of man upon the low, cold earth, some to protect, others to conquer. Unknown. So the relevant portion of this is that the idea of this came from ancient aliens, maybe that there was civilizations before us, and then how would that look? So in a way, this is science fiction set in the future, but you could also think of it as science fiction set in the past. You know, the work from Graham Hancock. I'm sure most of you who subscribe here probably subscribe to Neurotics. If you don't, please do. I mean, I'm not telling you something you don't already know. He's huge, and deservedly so. But Graham Hancock, you know, he's been on Joe Rogan, things like that, and he's got this new Netflix series. But that there may have been a more advanced culture before us. You know, I have another story that I'm wanting to write that is the end of that culture, but the reason we don't have any evidence other than stonework of that old culture is because the old culture was based on biotechnology, and the cataclysm that occurred wiped the biotechnology off the face of the earth. So all that's left is the bones of the stone that was left that was the foundation of that technology, perhaps. You know, it's just stuff that comes to me that I play with. So I had a lot of spare time when I was a child. This is what I've changed it to now. It is not based on the fall of the angels. So it is actually based on the creation of man story, the actual expulsion, exile from Eden. So it was formerly Fall of Angels. As you'll see here, I've changed it to Expulsion, or maybe we'll change it on something else. Let's label it Working Title, because I'm not sure I'm real happy with that, you know. What am I doing? I'm not high, I promise. Not today. Alright, formerly Fall of Angels. So what I did was I took a quote. I went and I've been rereading Genesis for this source material and reading some kind of really deep stuff. I mean, anywhere from just above Bible story level study of this all the way deep into like Jordan B. Peterson's Genesis talk. That's really, really deep in talks about. I love how he talks about story and dream and how it's an integrated part of our being and our sense of self. Because that's what I do is I dream and I write them down and I share them with people. So it's going to be based on that. And what I did was I looked and I saw that God created Adam, and then he planted the garden. If you read the New King James Version. So there was a time period, because God didn't plant the Garden of Eden until, actually he didn't even make man until after the seventh day, when he rested. So there was a time period where earth was alone. There was no man upon it, which, you know, you think about it, that relates to scientific norms in a way. So and then God created man, but then he had to plant the garden before man could be placed upon the earth. Now, I come from a school of thought that leans heavily into science was made by man to explain what God did. And that the fact that the first several books of the Bible, Genesis especially, was written by a man who was not well spoken, admittedly from his own lips. Moses, and I don't know if that's nailed down or if it's still just speculation that it was written by Moses, but the idea was that God gave him a vision, and he had to explain in his own words what that vision was. Therefore, the Big Bang was actually God saying, "Let there be light." The big, in the firmament, and then that everything created was a natural expression of the causation of that Big Bang that followed. So it took time for man to come to Earth. Well, because I'm doing this from a science fiction format, the idea is that over generations, God, this AI that has become the father of humanity, because his main objective and principal function is to protect humanity indefinitely, which he is finding difficult to resolve, since even a quantum AI that knows all and sees all cannot predict an accident that might occur cosmically. Now, a true omniscient sentience, like a god, and in this story, the AI reflects God, would necessarily be able to do that. So I'm janking with the basic premise in order to tell the story. Although that's what you're going to think. So the idea is that man had to wait for the garden to be built, and therefore he was in a stasis state at its basic form. He had to wait. So therefore that's where this comes from. That's how I'm justifying it logically in my mind, and I need to portray that logical conclusion through the work. Therefore that's why I put this here, because God and then the Father made man to sleep whilst he planted the garden. And in this story, the garden, the Eden, is the colony ship that is to leave and find a new place to seed or spawn humanity. So we've changed that. It was formerly chapter 1. You see here I changed it to chapter 2. And we're going to call it rebirth instead of stasis. Although stasis would still go. Now, you know that this picture is what I used for the last thumbnail. I might reuse that thumbnail or a version of it. Maybe play with it a bit. But it still really conveys what I would like to see. And I'll probably do 2 or 3 of these writings, though. This video has mostly been the setup for that. And it's really boring to just sit and watch somebody write. I don't usually contemplate aloud. However, what I do is I take and copy over the old version to I just open it up and I start working, and then I save it as a new version. So I've got the old version, as you can see, underneath, and then I've got the new version that is a working document. So when I change stuff, I usually go below it. I know that there's functions in Word that do all this, but you have to understand I come from a generation, Generation X, also known as the Forgotten Generation, who grew up without technology. I learned how to type on a manual typewriter, which is why I have to have a very sturdy mechanical keyboard to type as fast as I do. I type about 120 words a minute because I had a lot of typing and a lot of time on my hands, and we were really desperately poor when I was a child. So enough of that. What I want to do is I want to go through it and I read the work aloud because I've given it time. I haven't really dwelt upon it. It's not fresh in my mind. I do have an eidetic memory, but it's a lower version of that. So sometimes it's hard for me to see holes. I mean, my novel I've worked on for 30 years, and I'm still finding holes in it, which is why I'm trying to have people I reached out to several friends on Twitter, and you look for me. It's StoryMan-Jack at Twitter, and have a few people doing like a beta read, because the goal is within 3 months to have it to a line editor, pay for the cover, get a quote on how much it will cost to print, and go on Indiegogo. Posters, there'll be posters, there'll be art for each character, there will be bookmarks, there'll be tiers. I'm actually have written a version of a basically a writ legend of prophecy that I'm putting in a handwritten, it looks like an old school tome, written in calligraphic writing by my hand, signed and personalized. That will be a tier. Things like that. Really fun stuff that you wouldn't normally get with a novel. Honestly, if I could draw, I would make a cartoon to promote it, or a commercial. But as it is, I can't even really voice over, even though I do my own stories. I'm a poor guy. I do this for fun. So anyway, I'm going to give you an example. This video has gotten a lot longer because I have diarrhea of the mouth. I apologize. We will do this, maybe two little paragraphs here, and then for the next episode I'll record some of the stuff I do and then go back over it. So probably the next few episodes will be something like that. I would love for you to give me your ideas at the so I can incorporate them in the next video, which will be in a couple of days. I'm trying to figure out a schedule that works, that is spaced out, though not too much so that YouTube's algorithm screws me over, which it has been doing, since I do not have a lot of time to put videos out at this point right here, and it is the holidays, so it's really difficult with everything going on. I have an extended family. So, being said, let's get started. Everything is supposed to stop. The stasis field powered by the eternal supply of free energy from a fusion plant that would keep anything in a field unaffected by time indefinitely. Time. How long is an eternity? What dreams come to those who are stuck between moments? So I like this part here, right? And technically, because it's from his point of view, I should put it this way. Maybe not use a, I'm sorry, my mouse is really fast because I was playing a game earlier. Let me see if I can change it. Alright, there we go. Alright, everything is so I'm thinking about how it would feel at this point, how it would feel to step into stasis, because the theory around it is that you would go from moment to moment and not even notice that there was time involved because you were out. Supposedly you would be outside of time. It was a bubble. Okay. However, my idea with this is that the dream state of a human consciousness may not be in complete sync with the natural state of our awareness. Like the subconscious is not tied to time as the conscious is tied to time. That, like when we sleep, our reality, our perception of time becomes something totally different and totally unattached. So that step between moments is where the dream detaches and time passes, though, etc., etc. So that's what I was using before to give us kind of a background, right? So what we're going to do, and yes, I have Grammarly, as you can see up here, and as I've said before, we don't want to use Grammarly as an end all be all because it is geared for business writing, and fiction necessarily you have to break grammar rules, especially with dialogue, especially when you get with poetic license. If you're in a descriptive moment and you're adding an emotion, there are reasons to break the rules of style and grammar, but you use those very sparingly because those, again, are one of those things that are the exception to prove the rule. And I admit I use too much of that from time to time, like this. Time. How long is an eternity? What dreams come to those who are stuck between moments? So that expresses the whole theory that time is detached from our subconscious. I'm hoping I'm portraying that, and I try to assume that the reader is at least as smart as I am. Okay, and it's better for me to go through life believing that I'm average, that my intelligence is as average as anybody else's. So I don't have an arrogant capacity, although I've been accused of talking down from time to time. I'm actually just talking to myself. I am the reader at this point. You, when you write your first draft, when you're working on your second or your first edit, you are writing for yourself, right? You know what you like. You know what you love to read. And necessarily your work is going to be refracted and reflected in what you've read up to this point. We use the styles of those we love. We have that in us to know what we feel is good, and we know what works. I mean, I've said it before. If you grew up as I did and went to 12 years, 13 years of American institutional education, then you were repetitively taught grammar. That's not something you're going to have to look for very hard. Plus, we have all these tools that work. You know by your ear what sounds correct, right? And it is necessary when you're using a narrative voice to make sure your grammar is correct, because sometimes our ears are tricky and our minds translate for us, which is why you're supposed to leave your work alone and not dwell upon it for a time, so that you see these glaring, obvious problems when you go to rewrite. So I do not like the way this is written. Everything is supposed to stop, period. The stasis filled, powered by... See, this is too complex. I have a problem with complex sentences. That is something I can completely admit. A lot of people have that problem. They want to sound more intelligent than they actually are, or they are used to reading very technical documents. I work in a field where I do that quite a bit. The stasis field. So there was a little skip there because I got interrupted. But this is what we're going to write it down as. Just simplify things. Testing upon testing for years. The only 5 practical long-term studies for research. I think here is where it would be better to explain the technology behind it. Now, these human beings were created in a lab. So they, and educated, as we saw in the last chapter, that does seriously need to be rewritten again. I can't emphasize that enough. Probably what we'll do next. So I'll rewrite this one. We'll do the three just the tips for this one, and then the next. Well, actually, we'll do this just the tip. I'll rewrite it. Then we'll go back and we'll go ahead and rewrite the pre-chapter that we just did, since it's been long enough because I've been so busy over the holidays. And we will get those get that one rewritten. We'll do just the tip on that, and then we'll do one episode one day, and then the other episode the next day, so you can see the changes. And hopefully we'll go ahead and link the original versions back in. Now I'm not going to bore you with me going through this and reading to myself and all that stuff, but I wanted to show you how I go about doing this, and I hope it was informative. And remember, you know, this is the way I do things. Is that the correct way? Is that the way that for you? Maybe, maybe not. I'm just trying to be helpful and give out the information that I've learned over time. So please comment below. If you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. And share this out to all your friends and family, because, as you know, YouTube does not promote independent channels as well as it used to do. So I would appreciate that. And remember, your life is your story. Make it a great one. Have a good day. What the fuck happened? Okay. Okay.